Hey everyone, welcome back. And today we are doing our monthly educational video, and as you can see today, it is on bees. And some of you probably understand that this is going to be a video with some jokes in it and stuff like that. So first, let's go ahead and get the first one off, and not the bees! Anyways. So, this educational video, we're going to be doing it on bees. So, we'll go over different types of bees, some general stuff about bees, like flight. We'll also be making jokes about the bee movie at times, and just learning about bees and being all wonderful. Because all bees are not honeybees. There's bumblebees, carpenter bees, vulture bees, all these different types of bees. So, we're going to be going over quite a few different types this time. So, first off, to be or not to be, what is a bee? A bee is a winged insect closely related to wasps and ants, known by for their role in pollination, and in the case of their best known bee species, the western honeybee, for the production of honey. There are over 20,000 known species of bees, so that's a dang lot of them. And some species include honeybees, bumblebees, stingless bees, that live socially in colonies, while most species include mason bees, carpenter bees, leafcutter bees, and sweat bees, which are solitary. We'll go over the difference between solitary and social bees later. So, first, a classification of bees here. So, we have the domain Eukaryota, kingdom Animalia, phylum Arthropoda, class Insecta, order Hymenoptera, suborder Apocrita, infraorder Aculeata, superfamily Apodia, clade Anthophila, and then we have all these different families here. And then we have a picture here of different types of bees between social and solitary. So solitary ones being like carpenter bees, mining bees, mason bees, stuff like that. And then social bees being like bumblebees and honeybees, stuff like that. So, the range for bees. Bees are found on every continent except for Antarctica, like most insects, and they are in every habitat on the planet that contains insect pollinating flowering plants. So, if there's a flowering plant in an area, there's probably a bee that probably pollinates it. Humans have been keeping bees for a long time. It's also known as apiculture if you want to be really specific on the word for beekeeping. And the practice has been around for millennia, since at least the times of the ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. And if you look at the very top here, at this picture here, this is some of the first beehives that were done in ancient Egypt, which are mud and they're circular, kind of like almost barrels or whatever, and then they're stacked on top of each other. So these are all beehives right there. The only domesticated species of honeybee are known as the western and eastern honeybee, and modern hives also enable beekeeping to transport bees, moving them from field to field as crops need pollinating, allowing beekeepers to charge for the pollination services they provide, while also producing honey. So, evolution. Bees are thought to have originated during the early Cretaceous, around 124 million years ago, about, on the supercontinent of West Gondwana, just prior to its breakup into South America and Africa. The immediate ancestors of these bees were stinging wasps, which were predators of other insects. The switch from insect prey to pollination may have resulted from the consumption of prey insects which were flower visitors, where partially covered with pollen. And when they were fed to the wasp larvae, they started becoming bees, as we know today. So basically, they started eating bugs that had pollen on them, and they're like, hey, this pollen doesn't taste that bad. Maybe we can just start eating pollen instead of killing other bugs. That's what's thought, at least. So, the anatomy of a bee. You can see right above me here, we do have a picture of a bee, or at least the head of a bee. They have a pair of large compound eyes, which are covered much of the surface of the head. Between and above these are three simple eyes. You can see right here, 1, 2, 3. And which provide information on light intensity. The antennae are usually 13 segments in males and 12 in females, and they house a large number of sense organs that can detect touch, smell, and taste. And they have small hair-like mechanoreceptors that can detect air movement such as to hearing. The mouth parts are adapted for both chewing and sucking by having both a pair of mandibles and a long proboscis for sucking up nectar. So, anatomy continued. So, the thorax has three segments, each with a pair of robust legs and a pair of membrane wings on the hind two segments. The front legs of a bee bear combs for cleaning the antennae, and in many species, the hind legs have pollen baskets. And you can see the pollen baskets here on the bottom that just have tons and tons of pollen on their back legs. Then they have flattened sections with incurved hairs to secure the collected pollen. That's the pollen basket. The abdomen has 9 segments, and the hindmost 3 being modified into the stinger there. So you can look a little closer here at this thing. You have the forewings, hind wings, you have the sting or the stinger, the pollen baskets on the legs, on the hind leg, and middle legs, forelegs, all the other stuff, the antennae, compound eyes, and mandibles, proboscis, everything you want to see there. So, one of the first bees we're going to look at is the Wallace's giant bee, which is a large bee found in Indonesia, and they are only found on 3 islands of North Moluccas in Indonesia: Bacan, Halmahera, and Tidore. And it is the largest known living species of bee. That's one of the main reasons why I put it on here, with a wingspan of 63.5 millimeters or 2.5 inches. The males are much smaller, and only females have the large jaws. So the pictures here I have of them are of females. They were believed to be extinct until several specimens were discovered in 1981, and a living female was found filmed for the first time in 2019. So until very recently, they were still found alive. So they should be, even though they're kind of a little bit endangered. They're easily distinguished from other bees due to its large size and jaws, but also a notable white band on its abdomen here. And you can see it on both these pictures. They build communal nests inside active nests of tree-dwelling termites, and they use the tree resin to build compartments inside the termite's nest. Okay, so we have the largest bee with the Wallace bee. Now we have these mining bees here. Perdita minima is known as one of the smallest types of bees. It's a species of mining bee, and is a solitary ground nesting bee, so it will live kind of by itself and nest inside the ground or on the ground. And it's the smallest known species of bee, just under 2 millimeters long, and weighing about 0.33 milligrams. So very, very, very small. And it's found in North America, and specifically in the southwestern US, and often inhabits the desert areas. And they build small nests in the sandy soils there. And then I do have a picture here of it on what looks like to be a small flower. So we have the biggest bee and the smallest bee here already. Now let's go and talk about the difference between social bees and solitary bees. So eusociality is the highest level of organization of sociality. It is defined as the following characteristics: cooperative brood care, overlapping generations within a colony of adults, and the division of labor into reproductive and non-reproductive groups. The group is called eusocial if, in addition to the group consisting of a mother and a queen and her daughter's workers. So basically, a group is eusocial if it consists of the queen and its workers. So this would be considered the bumblebees also do this, and then of course honeybees that we all know about. Solitary and communal bees are a little bit different. So most other bees, including familiar insects such as carpenter bees, leafcutter bees, and mason bees, are solitary. Every female is fertile in this, and typically they inhabit a nest that she constructs herself. There is no division of labor, so these nests lack queens and worker bees. Solitary bees typically produce neither honey nor beeswax. Most dig nests in the ground, while others create nests in hollow reeds or twigs or even holes in wood. and they are very, very unlikely to sting you. Life cycle. Be it solitary or social species, it usually involves the leg of an egg and the development through several molts of a legless larva, a pupation stage during which the insect undergoes a complete metamorphosis, followed by the emergence of a winged adult. So basically, goes from an egg to a small larvae to a complete adult bee, basically, between a few molts. Most solitary bees and bumblebees in temperate climates will overwinter as adults or pupae, and then they will emerge in the spring when an increased number of flowering plants are in bloom. The male usually emerges first, whereas it will then search for a female with which to mate. So, reproduction. The bee stuff is not going to stop yet. So, how does a bee reproduce? So, they just walk up to a girl and say, "You like jazz, right?" Not exactly. So, reproduction usually involves a queen will go out for a virgin flight, whereas she'll fly around and try to find a drone bee, which they will mate midair. And that's this picture up here I have. And the drone will die right after reproduction. Whereas then the female will go back to the hive. So the number of eggs laid by a female during her lifetime can vary from 8 or less in solitary bees to more than 1 million in highly social species such as like honeybees and whatnot. Haplodiploidy is a sex determination system in which males develop from unfertilized eggs and are haploid, whereas females develop from fertilized eggs and are diploid. So, whenever the queen or the bee wants to produce males, she'll just lay eggs without being fertilized. Whereas if she wants females, then she will fertilize the eggs, which they'll then grow up into like workers or whatnot for females. So, after mating, a female stores the sperm and determines which sex is required at the time each individual egg is laid. The fertilized eggs, of course, like we said, produce females, while the unfertilized produce males. So, the very first of the life cycle is the egg. So, generally, they are oblong, slightly curved, and tapered at one end. So, you can see here inside each one of these combs, these should be honeybees because of the comb. You can see the little egg there. And then also, like right next to this egg, you can see one here that actually has a larvae that has already like hatched and grown a little bit. But we'll move on to that later. So we're just looking at these little worm, oblong egg looking ones. Solitary bees lay each egg in a separate cell with a supply of mixed pollen and nectar next to it. This may be rolled into a pellet or placed in a pile known as mass provisioning. Whereas social bees, they will progressively provision the larvae or egg. That is, they feed the larvae regularly while it grows up. So solitary, they just leave a little pellet of food and leave. Whereas social bees will keep feeding them as they grow up. Larvae is the next form of them. So, as you can see here, I have a picture of just a larvae, and then I have a picture of a hive that has many, many, many different larvae in each one of these little hexagons. Or cells, I guess as you'd say. In most species, larvae are whitish grubs, roughly oval and bluntly pointed at both ends. They usually have around 15 segments and spiracles in each segment for breathing. They have no legs but move within the cell, helped by tubercles on each side. They have short horns on the head, jaws for chewing food, and an appendage on either side of the mouth tipped with a bristle. The gland under the mouth secretes a viscous fluid which solidifies into silk, which they'll then use to produce a cocoon. The cocoon is semi-transparent and the pupae can be seen through it. And over the course of a few days, the larvae will undergo metamorphosis, in which it will go into a winged adult. So now let's look at flight. And I'm sure all of you know that according to all known laws of aviation, a bee should not be able to fly. Its wings are just too small to get its fat little body off the ground. However, the bee flies anyways because it doesn't care what humans think is impossible. Yes, the bee movie, of course. But yeah, it's a common misconception that bees violate aerodynamic theory. It's not true at all. Their flight could not be explained by fixed wing calculations. but confirms that bees do not engage in fixed-wing flight, and that their flight is explained by other mechanics. There was a high-speed cinematography of a robotic mock-up of a bee wing, showed that the lift was generated by the unconventional combination of short, choppy wing strokes and a rapid rotation of the wing as it flops over and reverses direction, and a very fast wing beat frequency. Basically, what that means is that the bees fly in a different way, so they do not violate aerodynamic theory like the bee movie says. So, for navigation, honeybees communicate by the waggle dance. They also have a couple other dances, but the waggle dance is one of the main ones, in which a worker will indicate the location of a food source to other workers in the hive. Bees can recognize a desired compass direction in 3 different ways: by the sun, by the polarization pattern of the blue sky, and by the Earth's magnetic field. The sun is the preferred or main compass. The other mechanisms are used under cloudy skies or inside a dark hive. So, let's look at the waggle dance here. By performing this dance, successful foragers can share information about the direction and distance to patches of flowers yielding nectar and pollen. Or it could also be a water source or a new nest site location for other members or whatever. But basically, if you look at this here, so the sun, some sort of different angle, and then 1 second equals 1 kilometer. So it will go in like a figure 8, go like zigzaggy, and then go back, zigzag, go back, zigzag, go back, and whatnot. So basically, it's just making kind of a figure 8, and 1 second of this loop is equal to 1 kilometer to that flower. And then they fly in whatever direction the flower is. So basically, they're saying, oh, the flower is in this direction 1 kilometer away. Or if it goes for more than 1 second, 2 kilometers away, or 3. So it's actually pretty interesting how they do that. So, digestion. Pollinating bees consume nectar and pollen, which require different digestive strategies. While nectar is a liquid of mostly monosaccharide sugars, and so are easily absorbed, pollen contains complex polysaccharides. Approximately 5 groups of bacteria are involved in the digestion. 3 groups specialize in simple sugars, and then the other 2 groups are in the complex sugars. Some bees, like the vulture bee, turn meat into a honey-like substance. So, some other organisms do try to mimic bees. So, non-stinging insects such as bee flies, robber flies, or hover flies, all of which gain a measure of protection by looking and behaving like a bee. Bees are also mimicked by plants, such as the bee orchid, which imitates both the appearance and the scent of a female bee. The male bees will attempt to mate with the flower, thus pollinating it. So here we have a picture of a bee orchid. And then we have here, I'm pretty sure this is a bee fly right here. But could also be a robber fly. I can't remember which one I have it as. So, brood parasites. I think we've talked about brood parasites before in some other video. But basically, brood parasites are something that will lay their eggs or young inside the nest of some other species to have that species take care of their own babies. So, females of these species lack pollen collecting structures and do not construct their own nests. They typically enter the nest of pollen collecting species, and then they'll lay their eggs in cells provisioned by the host bee. And then when the bee larvae hatches, it consumes the host larvae's pollen ball and often the host egg also. So basically, the brood parasite species will lay an egg inside the cell of the pollen collecting species, and the brood parasite species' egg will hatch, eat the egg, and then also eat the provisions or the pollen of the pollen collecting species. So, predators, parasites, and pathogens, there are quite a few of all of these, but we'll go over some here. So, honey buzzards attack bee nests and will eat the larvae of them. The Great Honey Guide interacts with humans by guiding them to the nests of wild bees, and the humans will break open the nest to take the honey, while the bird feeds on the larvae and the wax. Badgers will dig up bumblebee nests and eat both the larvae and any stored food inside them. There are certain ambush predators like crab spiders and praying mantises that will wait on flowers for the pollinating insects to eat them. There are bee wolves, which are large wasps that attack bees, and a single colony of bee wolf might kill several thousand honeybees in just a day. There are honeybees that are affected by parasites, including tracheal and veromites. First, let's go ahead and talk about an Asian giant hornet. They're also known as the northern giant hornet or the Japanese giant hornet. They are the world's largest hornet. They are native to the temperate and tropical East Asia and South Asia, mainland Southeast Asia, and then parts of Russia far east. It creates nests by digging and using pre-existing tunnels dug by rodents or other occupying space near rotten pine roots. And they feed primarily on large insects, colonies of other eusocial insects, tree sap, and honey from the honeybee colonies. And the body length of these can be around 45 millimeters or just close to 2 inches. Pretty close. They have a wingspan of around 75 millimeters or 3 inches and a stinger of 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch long. So they are very, very big and they have a pretty long stinger. And as you can see there, the reason why I put this in here is because Asian giant hornets, I think it was about a year or so ago, there was kind of a scare here in the United States where they thought the Asian giant hornet had gotten over here, and they actually ended up finding some and killing them because they are very, very bad for honeybee colonies. That, and they're not supposed to be over here in the United States anyways. So they are a very, very big problem for bees. And I do have a picture here of one. I should have had a ruler next to it just to see, but I guess you have the measurements here. So, what do bees do in defense of themselves? So, all honeybees live in colonies where the workers sting intruders as a form of defense. And the alarm bees release a pheromone that stimulates the attack response in other bees. So, one bee will sting, and that will release a pheromone that makes all the other bees also sting. The worker bees will die after the stinger becomes lodged and is torn loose from the bee's abdomen. So you can see here of a stinger up here with the venom sac attached to it. Then there is also a defense against larger insects such as predatory wasps or the Asian giant hornet. And it's usually performed by surrounding the intruder with a mass of defending workers, which will then vibrate their muscles vigorously to raise the temperature of the intruder to lethal levels. And it's called balling. So the increased temperature in combination with the increased carbon dioxide levels within the ball produce the lethal effect. So they will basically either cook or suffocate the enemy inside the ball. And that's the picture I have way up here. So that's pretty cool. And I think that is actually an Asian giant hornet inside the ball. So, relationship with humans. Bees play an important role in pollinating flowering plants and are a major type of pollinator in many ecosystems that contain flowering plants. It's estimated that 1/3 of the human food supply depends on pollination by insects, birds, bats, and most of which is accomplished by bees. Honey is a natural product produced by bees or honeybees and is stored for their own use, but its sweetness is always appealing to humans, so we usually try to steal it. Bees are considered edible insects, and people in some countries eat insects, including the larvae and pupae of bees, which mostly the single species. Apitherapy is a branch of alternative medicine that uses honeybee products, including raw honey, royal jelly, pollen, beeswax, and stuff like that, and bee venom also. And the use of beeswax is used in making candles, soaps, lip balms, and various cosmetics. So there are a lot of different uses for like basically everything a bee does. So let's look at one of the other parasites of a bee. So the Verodestructor. This is also known as a veromite, and they are very detrimental to honeybees. And really any bee, but mostly the honeybees. The adult female mite is reddish brown in color, as you can see right up here. And you can also see what they look like on a larvae and then also of an adult bee. Veromites are flat, having a button shape. They're about 1 to 1.8 millimeters long, or 1.5 to 2 millimeters wide, and have 8 legs, and they also lack eyes. So, they are an external parasitic mite that attacks and feeds on honeybees and is one of the most damaging honeybee pests in the world. A significant mite infestation can lead to the death of a honeybee colony. Without management for the varroa honeybee colonies typically collapse within 2 to 3 years in temperate climates. They are also the vector for at least 5 debilitating bee viruses, including the RNA virus such as deformed wing virus or DWV. And the deformed wing virus basically makes it so the bees' wings are either not as effective or totally makes it so they can't fly. So you can see how that can be very debilitating to a bee, and if 2 3 years most of the colony has that wing virus, they can easily die. The Vero destructor life cycle is basically the female mite will enter the brood cell to lay eggs on the comb wall after the cell is capped, and the eggs are approximately, like, they're very, very, very small, 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters in diameter, and cannot be seen without magnification. So the eggs will hatch into male and females, and they are both transparent white. The immature mites can only feed on the capped brood, so the life cycle cannot be completed during broodless periods. The protonymphs will molt into deuteronymphs that more closely resemble the curved body of the adults before they molt into the adults. The development time for the eggs to adults is about 6 to 7 days. The males will not leave the brood cells and only mate with females present in their brood cells. The adult females can be found feeding both on brood and adult bees, and the female mites will attach to adult bees in order to disperse. So they might get on nurse bees, which are preferred hosts, in order to move to new brood cells, because the nurse bees, they're going to be going to like tons and tons of cells, easily letting the females get to new brood to feed on and lay their eggs. The female mites have a life expectancy of about 27 days. So, now let's move on to a few other different bee species. So, I'm sure a lot of people know about the bumblebee, probably the second most known bee next to the honeybee. They are found primarily in northern hemisphere, and although they also are found in South America, where a few lowland tropical species can be identified. So I have a map here of it, so you can see here and here and here. So North America, South America, then also Eurasia, and the very top of Africa. Then also they kind of go into Indonesia, I think that is. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, they go to a lot of different places. And then we have a picture here of a bumblebee. Then we have a picture here of a nest of them, and they're just like on the ground in some like dead grass and whatnot. Female bumblebees can sting repeatedly, but they generally ignore humans and other animals. The stinger lacks barbs, so the bee can sting repeatedly without leaving the stinger in the wound and thereby injuring itself. Most bumblebees are social insects that form colonies with a single queen. The colonies are smaller than those of honeybees, growing to a few as 50 individuals in a nest. Many species nest underground, choosing a old rodent burrow or sheltered places. Other species make nests above ground, whether in thick grass or in a hole in a tree, something like that. They are known to have round bodies covered with soft hair, making them appear or feel fuzzy. A bumblebee nest is not organized into hexagonal combs like a honeybee. The cells are instead clustered together untidily. We mentioned a little while ago about digestion, about some bees, mainly the vulture bee here, that uses meat. So, vulture bees, as you can see in this picture right here, feed on rotting meat. Vulture bees are reddish brown in color, featuring only a few lighter hairs on their thorax. And they range in length from 8 to 22 millimeters, or 0.31 to 0.87 inches. So, less than an inch long. They have strong, powerful mandibles. They are used to tear flesh. And they're found throughout South America, including Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. And when a forager returns to the nest, this meat is then regurgitated into a storage pot. It is then consumed by a worker bee and processed by its highly acidic gut. The resulting substance is rich and high in protein, And these protein-rich secretions are then stored in a pot-like chamber within the nest until it is time to feed to immature bees. The secretions replace the role of pollen in a bee's diet, as vulture bees lack adaptation for carrying pollen, and the pollen stores are absent from their nests. So they make this thing that is called meat honey, which is a mixed sugary plant product with a paste from regurgitated meat. So it's a little bit of sugary plant product and a little bit of meat together. Sounds kind of disgusting in my mind. But, I mean, it's a pretty cool adaptation that they can do. So, like, if there's not that much pollen around, they don't have to eat pollen. They can eat meat. And then also, I'm guessing probably nectar is the mixed sugary product. And then I have a picture here of a nest. And the nest looks very fleshy. If you, like, it reminds me kind of like Stranger Things, the upside down, the fleshy bits there. So yeah, pretty cool. Actually looks kind of disgusting. Then we have a sweat bee. Sweat bees can look pretty different. So this one here is green. This one here looks more like a regular bee with the yellow and black. But they're often attracted by perspiration. That's the reason why they are called sweat bees. And they occur all over the world and are found on every continent except for Antarctica. They're usually dark colored, frequently brown or black, and they're often metallic, kind of like the green. And then they are found in various sizes, colors, and patterns. Several species are all or partly green, a few are red, purple, or blue. Others have the yellow and black markings. Most species nest in the ground and often in habitats like clay soil, riverbanks, though a few nest in wood. They mass provision their young, where a mass of pollen or nectar is formed inside the waterproof cell, and then an egg is laid upon it, the cell sealed off, and then the larvae is given all of its food at one time. And then only females have the ability to deliver a sting. So male sweat bees, you'll never have them sting you at all. Females, on the other hand, yeah. Okay, next we have the carpenter bee. Carpenter bees, of course, you can see right here. If you have like a wooden built house or something like that, you probably have seen a carpenter bee before. The common name carpenter bee derives from the nesting behavior, and nearly all species burrow into hard plant material such as dead wood or bamboo. Carpenter bees do not eat the wood that they like chew up. They discard the wood bits or reuse the particles to build partitions between the cells. So you can see right here up top, you can see how they build the cells. So this is the hole they can build on the other side. So they'll build that, and then they will put like an egg at the very end. They'll make a little partition, put another egg, make another partition, put another egg, and like they'll just keep doing that until like they fill up the hole. They are considered solitary bees, though some species have a simple social nest in which the mothers and daughters may cohabitate. The eggs are very large relative to the size of the female, and some of the largest eggs among all insects. But yeah, me at my house, we have a lot of carpenter bees, and they are kind of annoying because they just eat up your house. Like, if you have any sort of wood, like any benches or something like that, there will be a hole in them, and there will be a carpenter bee that is building a nest inside that thing. So, we go from the chaotic carpenter bee to the more nice mason bee. Because mason bees are named for their habit of using mud or other masonry products in constructing their nests, which are made in natural occurring gaps, such as between cracks in stones or other small dark cavities. They also use hollow stems and holes in wood made by wood boring insects. So, these mason bees could possibly, I guess, after carpenter bees are done with a hole, they could go inside and they could make a nest out of a carpenter bee hole. And then they'll even like cover up the holes, which they'll eventually hatch out. But they'll cover up the holes for a little bit. I actually like mason bees quite a bit. Okay, I like the idea of them. So they are solitary, and every female is fertile. and they make her own nest. And no worker bees for the species exist. The males typically remain near the nest, waiting for the females, and the males soon die after mating. So, when the females emerge, they will mate with one or several males, and within a few days, the female will begin provisioning their nests, or collecting food. Each nest will have multiple eggs laid in separate partitions, kind of like the carpenter bee, and the female eggs are laid in the very back of the nest, and male eggs toward the front. After hatching, they eat the pollen and cocoon until next year. So, the reason why they'll lay the female eggs in the back and the males in the front is because the male eggs will hatch first. So they want them to get out, and then later, whenever they find a female, after the females hatch, they mate. They are immune from Acarian and Veromites, but they have their own unique parasites, pests, and diseases. If you look up here, you can see a picture of a mason bee. I think that's a male and female. Male on top, I think, and female on the bottom. Then of this one, of their nest. So you can see like carpenter bee, where it'll lay an egg. Then there'll be a little partition, another egg, partition, egg. And I think this is a leafcutter bee because they do the same thing as a mason bee. And I think this is actually a mason bee. And then right here, we have the block of what it looks like at the very end. So they use mud, clay, stuff like that, masonry components to block up the hole. Next, we have stingless bees, which stingless bees, it's kind of a lie because they do have stingers, but the stingers are so reduced in size that they can't really be used for defense. So you don't really have to worry about them stinging you, but they do still have stingers. Some stingless bees have powerful mandibles and can inflict painful bites, though. So you don't have to worry about the stings, but you might have to worry about bites. Some species can present large mandible glands for the secretion of caustic defense substances, and they secrete unpleasant smells or a sticky material to immobilize enemies. They can also be found in most tropical or subtropical regions of the world, such as African continent, Southeast Asia, Australia, and tropical America, kind of like the map we have right up here. The body lengths range from 2 to 5 millimeters, or 0.08 to 0.6 inches. Only a few of them produce honey on a scale such that they are farmed by humans, and the colonies typically consist of a queen, workers, and sometimes male drones. They will collect, store honey, pollen, resin, and other stuff. The resin and stuff are used in nest construction and maintenance. The nesting behavior varies among species, and they may involve a hollow tree trunk, external hives, the soil, termite nests, or even urban structures. And the large population may have as many as 5 queens simultaneously laying eggs. So, here we have a picture of one of these small stingless bees up here. Then we have a picture of a nest, which I guess this would be considered an external hive, because it's not really in a hollow tree trunk and it's not in the soil, or I don't think that's a termite nest. But yeah, this is an example of the nests, and like they said before, these are very small species, and even if they do produce honey, they might not produce enough that humans really care about farming them. And it's pretty cool they can have up to 5 queens laying eggs simultaneously. So I guess if one were to die, then there are 4 others that can continue to lay eggs. So that's a little bit of a helpful thing. Just in case one dies, the whole hive doesn't die. So, now that we've got over all those bee species, now I can talk about the honeybee. You've probably been thinking it's like, you're talking about bees, but you haven't said very much about a honeybee yet. And that's because there's going to be quite a few more slides about honeybees, because a lot of more people know a lot more stuff about honeybees. So, here we have a picture of some honeybees on a comb with all their different cells. They're native to the mainland of Africa, Asia, and Europe. Humans became responsible for the current cosmopolitan distribution of honeybees, and cosmopolitan distribution is basically worldwide distribution of honeybees. And honeybees are known for their construction of colonial nests from wax, the large size of their colonies, and the surplus production and storage of honey. Only 8 surviving species of honeybees are recognized, with a total of 43 subspecies, though historically there's been 7 to 11 species that are recognized. The best known honeybee species is the western honeybee, which they are domesticated for honey production and crop pollination. They're also, the second would probably be the eastern honeybee. So, honeybees. A colony generally consists of one queen bee, seasonally up to a few thousand drones or male bees, and then 10 of thousands of female worker bees. Like, just all the rest are workers, basically. So here we have worker bee, we have a queen bee, and then we also have a drone bee here. So colonies are not established by a solitary queen, as most bee species, but by groups known as a swarm, which consists of a mated queen and a large number of worker bees. The larvae are initially fed with royal jelly, which is produced by worker bees, and then later they are switched to honey and pollen. But if a larvae is fed solely on royal jelly, they will then develop into a queen bee. So I have some pictures here of different honeybee hives and stuff like that. This one you would consider to be an external hive, since the combs are built with no outside covering at all. Then in the middle here, we have pictures of like a human-built hive, like the boxes and whatnot. So these are frames, which this one, I can't tell if it's capped brood or it's honey. I'm not great at telling that apart. But yeah, these different frames can either have brood or honey stored on them. And then these are the boxes that each frame are put in. I think each box can have like up to 8 to 10 frames, something like that. There's 4 there. 1, 2, 3. That's a 4th one, so probably 8 frames in this one. Then this here, you can see an egg, then also a larvae, and then these are, I'm pretty sure, let me move myself. This picture right here, I'm pretty sure, are drones. But these are already eggs and larvae that have gone through metamorphosis, and they are just waiting to kind of like hatch out. Honeybee species, and like really any species of bee, have to worry about winter survival. So in cold climates, honeybees stop flying when the temperature drops below about 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they'll crowd into the central area of the hive to form a winter cluster. Whereas the winter cluster is basically the worker bees will huddle around the queen bee at the center of the cluster, and then they shiver to keep the center between 27 degrees Celsius or 81 degrees Fahrenheit at the start of winter, and then about 34 degrees Celsius or 93 degrees Fahrenheit once the queen resumes laying eggs. The worker bees will rotate through the cluster from the outside to the inside so that no bee gets too cold. So the outside edge of the cluster can stay around 8 to 9 degrees Celsius or 46 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's kind of nice that they don't just like let the outside ones die. They will like just like switch around. So like inside ones will go outside ones will go inside, and they'll keep shivering, keeping the heat up. During winter, they consume their store of honey to produce body heat. The amount of honey consumed during winter is basically a function of how long the winter is and how severe the winter is. So if it's a longer winter and more severe, they'll use a lot more honey. But if the winter length is short and not severe, they won't use very much at all. And it can use somewhere between 15 to 50 kilograms or 33 to 110 pounds of honey if the winter is really bad. So let's go over the different types of bee inside a honeybee colony, starting with the main queen herself, the queen bee. So as you can see on the picture above here, you can see the queen bee right here is marked. And usually beekeepers will mark a honeybee, the queen bee, to make it easier to see. So when they do inspection, they make sure like, oh, if anything, I want to make sure that she's still there and she's not somewhere I'm going to crush her. And then also, you can see this picture right next to it is queen cells. These cells are much bigger because they have to house a bigger queen bee. And whenever these hatch, a swarm is probably going to happen where the queen that's in the colony right now will take some of the worker bees and make a swarm and fly off to find a new place to build a colony. So, virgin queen bees go on a mating flight away from their home colony to a drone congregation area, and then they'll mate with multiple drones before returning, and the queen bee do not mate with drones from their home colony. Queen bees are produced in the oversized cells and develop in only 16 days. These are the oversized cells. She has a functional set of ovaries and a spermatheca, which stores and maintains sperm after she has mated. Once mated, the queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs per day, and the sting of a queen is not barbed like the worker sting, and the queen lacks the glands that produce beeswax. They produce a variety of pheromones that regulate the behavior of workers, and then they help the swarm track the queen's location during swarming. And like I said, a queen bee is only fed royal jelly when they're an egg, or a larvae, and that's the reason why they turn into a queen bee. All the other worker bees are fed royal jelly and then switch over to pollen and nectar and whatnot. Then we have the male bee, which is a drone bee. Drones develop from unfertilized eggs, like we said before, and are haploid. Drones take 24 days to develop and may be produced from summer through to autumn, and then they are expelled from the hive during winter months when the hive's primary focus is warmth and food conservation. So, it kind of sucks for a drone bee, because basically a drone bee, the main thing you're there for is reproduction. And whenever it becomes winter, and they're like, well, we're not going to be reproducing right now, guess you're going to go outside and die. And then also, the drone dies within minutes or hours after reproduction is complete. And then they also do not defend the hive or kill intruders and do not have a stinger. So that's kind of the reason why they don't really have any other use other than reproduction. And then we have a picture here of a drone bee. Then we have the worker bees, the ones that do basically all the other work. So we have a picture of a worker bee here. They are females that are developed from fertilized eggs and are diploid. Worker bees typically develop in 21 days, and the young worker bees, sometimes called nurse bees, clean the hive and then also feed larvae. Then, when the royal jelly producing glands begin to atrophy, they begin building comb cells. As they become older, they will then start receiving nectar and pollen from foragers and guarding the hive. Then, even later, a worker takes on her orientation flight where she leaves the hive and then she'll typically spend the remainder of her life foraging. Workers have different specializations, including pollen baskets. Then they also have abdominal glands that produce beeswax, brood feeding glands, and then also barbs on their stingers. And under certain conditions, if a colony becomes queenless, a worker may develop ovaries and start laying eggs. So basically, worker bees do basically everything. And as they grow up or age, their kind of focus changes from beginning to be nurse bees to then going on to collecting nectar and pollen from foragers to then flying out to find different flowers and whatnot and becoming foragers. So it's pretty dang cool. So now that we're talking about honeybees and we've got most of that out of the way, we can talk about Africanized bees, which Africanized bees are also known as Africanized honeybees or AHB, and also killer bee. So here's a picture of an Africanized bee here. So they are a hybrid of the western honeybee produced originally from crossbreeding of the East African lowland honeybee and then various European honeybee subspecies, such as the Italian honeybee and the Iberian honeybee. The East African lowland honeybee was first introduced to Brazil in 1956 in an effort to increase honey production, but 26 swarms escaped quarantine in 1957. Since then, the hybrid has spread throughout South America and arrived in North America in 1985. So, why are Africanized bees such a problem? Well, Africanized honeybees are typically much more defensive, and then they react to disturbances faster. And they'll even chase people further, up to 400 meters or 1,300 feet. than other varieties of honeybees. They have killed some 1,000 humans, with victims receiving 10 times more stings than from European honeybees. And they're also killed horses and other animals. So they are kind of dangerous. And the survival traits of Africanized bees help them outperform European honeybees colonies. They also return later and they work under conditions that often keep European honeybees hive bound. This is the reason why they have gained a reputation as superior honey producers. And then they have another advantage over European honeybees in that they seem to show a higher resistance to severe health effects. Like, I think also they might be somewhat resistant against veromites. I think someone heard. I can't remember for sure. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, they produce more honey and they are more defensive. So I mean, if something tries to attack them or something like that, they will fight them off better. So as long as you're wearing a bee suit, I would say Africanized bees are probably pretty good. But the problem is, if they get mad, they're gonna hurt. They're gonna hurt you. But that is all I had on bees. That is already, I think, the longest video I've made so far. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff on bees and a lot of stuff I ended up cutting out because there's only so much time in a day. Only so much time in a video. But I wanted to make this because at some point I want to try to raise some honeybees. So this was kind of my little homework project so that I could look up stuff about bees and kind of figure out what I need before I even buy some. Because I'm not for sure I want to get honeybees yet, but I think mason bees have sold me. Like, I think I want to get some mason bees to kind of try out. Like, because I have a strawberry patch, okay? Some of my strawberries don't get that well pollinated. So I'm like, okay, if I had some mason bees, and I've seen that mason bees can be kept like in the fridge until you really need them, and then whenever you take them out, it takes a couple days for them to hatch, or at least come out of their cocoon, and then they will pollinate like whatever's around for I can't remember exactly how long. But yeah, I'm thinking about getting mason bees to try them out a little bit. But honeybees are something I would like to have eventually down the line. So that was kind of cool for me to look up stuff about them. I kind of wish that stingless bees, let me see. Yeah, stingless bees. I wish stingless bees produce more honey. Because the thought of having bees that can't really sting you as much sounds great. I guess it would still be pretty good at pollination. You just wouldn't really get very much honey out of them. And I'm pretty sure you can get stingless bees where I'm at. I'm pretty sure. Like I said, mason bees are something I've really, really liked the idea of. Carpenter bees, I already have carpenter bees in my house. They're kind of annoying. Vulture bees, I loved looking at that because it was just so different and odd to use meat to make a sort of meat honey. It was just so weird, and the way their hives look right there, disgusting but so interesting. Bumblebees, I can't hate bumblebees, okay? They're just cute. And like they said here, they are appear and feel fuzzy, okay? Veromites are probably the main thing I'm going to have trouble with if I do end up having honeybees. And I know you have to do certain medications on the bees to kind of kill the mites. And you have to keep up with that, or like I said, within 2 to 3 years, the hive just dies. But yeah, I really liked looking up the stuff about bees. I hope you guys enjoyed all of this. And also, I finally got to make some bee puns for the bee movie and stuff like that, and also other stuff. But yeah, very cool just learning about bees. I hope you guys enjoyed. I don't really know what we're going to do for our next month's educational video. I'm always like this. I always take a ton of time to think about it, and I look up a lot of different stuff, and I'm like, well, that won't be quite as long of a video. I like for these to be at least 30 minutes or longer. This one, much longer than 30 minutes. But yeah, I'll come up with something, and I guess I'll see you guys next month when we have our next educational video. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed my bee rant and some of my bee puns. So just thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next month. So, bye bye.